Good evening. The Washington County Quorum Court Jail Law Enforcement and Courts Committee is called to order. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Yes, sir. Got a motion? Is there a second? Motion second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The agenda is approved. The first report will be the Juvenile Detention Report. Oops, let me get to the right page. Good evening, Director Tinsley.
Good evening. How are you all doing today? Thank you, sir. This is the June 2022 Jdc Report. In the month of June, we had 31 intakes, with the average length of stay being 6.9 days. The average daily population for June was 14.8. The highest number of intakes were possession of a firearm, with 6. Of the 31 intakes from Washington County and Madison County, 17 were from Division 3 and 13 were from Division 8. There were 11 total transports, 3 were from the Washington County Sheriff's Office and 8 were performed by JDC. Any questions? Yes, sir. Y'all have a good evening.
Item 4 on the agenda is the Sheriff's Report. Chief Deputy Cantrell.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I've got the enforcement activity report. Major Dinger will have the detention information and detention numbers, but nothing out of the ordinary to report on our enforcement report. There is an anomaly with our warrants. We've recently converted to a upgraded software platform, and so these numbers aren't populating into our report as in the past, so we'll get that corrected for the next meeting. But a lot of training. We did a lot of training in June. We do a yearly leadership training, but we've suspended it for a couple years because of COVID. So got that back going, where we require every employee to attend a 4-hour leadership course that we bring in a nationally renowned speaker. So that increases our training numbers. So besides that, things are going pretty good on our enforcement side. Be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Questions for Deputy Cantrell?
How are we on employees?
Well, our dispatch has, we've seen a marked increase in applications for our dispatch positions. I think that's directly as a result of the increased pay that the Quorum Court approved. So our dispatch positions are nearly full. Enforcement, we're down 4 positions in our enforcement section and 43 total in the jail, but that's better than the 47 or 49 it was 2 weeks ago. So we interviewed 2 more today and hired 2 more today. So we haven't lost anybody in 6 weeks or longer. So we're seeing an improvement. Things are looking better for us.
COVID coming back?
We've seen some employees with it. We've had 2 cases in the jail, but haven't seen it hit the jail hard. But we have had some employees out with it, but nothing serious, no serious cases. No serious illnesses as a result of it.
How's your patrol cars holding up?
You know, we're patching them up and keeping them going. You know, General Motors only builds police cars when they want to build police cars, so we're kind of at their mercy on when we can get new cars in. We think that we're in the queue for some to be delivered in September. So,
You say some, how many?
5 for enforcement and 6, I believe, for transport.
Because we just don't want to get to a ball where we need 20 or 30 at the same
Right,
time.
right. Yeah, we're trying to keep that as a
So approximately
yearly.
10, probably a 10 on their way.
Yes, yep.
So, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Superior Chevrolet ordered 400 police cars, knowing that they'll be able to get rid of them. So we think, over in Siloam, we think that they'll have them in September.
So is Superior doing all your wiring and lighting and everything now? Because they do that.
They do some of it, we do most of it when we
In-house?
can in-house. And then there's a guy at Farmington that subcontracts some of it.
Right.
Jason does some of it out there.
He's pretty good.
Yep, he does a good job for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Major Densler. Tell us something good.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. On 4.2, our intakes are about the same, same way on the prism, but the daily average, you can see what was last year and what we've jumped up to now. So there's one deal about the overcrowding in the jail, and you can go down to the pretrial down on board days from what it is now, 14,000 something compared to 10,000 last year. So, you know, we keep laughing or making a joke about business is good. You know, it really is. There's people moving in the area every day. Lots of new folks. And then on our pretrial bed count, it's not on this one here, but today and about a week ago that we broke 501 pretrial. You know, JP Harveston 400 was a big number, and now we're at 501. So. And everything else is just about the same. So, do you have any questions?
Questions for Major Densler? How many folks are on the floor today?
I think it's about 125 right now. Was able to put a few more up.
And are you still having to quarantine?
Yes, we do. I mean, like some of this COVID comes in just a little bit. Some of our prisoners we picked up at different locations come in asymptomatic, and we check them, and like I say, they have a couple blocks right now. So it just kind of comes and goes, you know, about 5 days, and we're back good. So that's really good for us.
Any other questions for Major Densler? Thank you, sir. Item 5 on the agenda is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee report. Drew and Matt and Nick and
All right, so you should have in your packet my one-page summary of what, some statistics for you guys. We have medical patients this month was at 306. Those waiting arrest and trial as of Thursday last week was 485. Last month, returning home had 4 intakes, 1 graduate, 1 abscond, and 1 discharge. Our failure to appear clinic in April had 9 pleas, 4 arraignments, and 14 rescheduled. For DUIs, DWIs, we had 82 intakes for DWI, 9 intakes for DWIs that were drug-related, and 1 intake for DUI. The questions that I received for the prosecutor's office, there are approximately 3,000 open cases But as far as defendant numbers, there's 1,700, so there are several people who have multiple cases. And then there are about 350 pretrial defendants in jail, and about 1,350 pretrial defendants out of our custody. And the number of cases resolved per month varies between 250 and 300. In June, it was 257. And the number of cases added is about 250 a month. So we're going at parallel to cases resolved and cases added. There are currently 20 full-time and 3 part-time deputy prosecuting attorneys. Of the full-time deputies, 14 handle adult felony cases, and all of the positions are currently filled.
Thank you. Questions for Drew? What you're telling us is all we're doing with all the things we've talked about for 3.5 years is holding our own?
Say that,
We're
rephrase that?
holding our own? That was a question for Matt.
I think you have to, the COVID numbers are kind of skewing things. Obviously you're dealing with a great deal of backlog. The answer to your question is I don't know. I mean, right now we are holding our own, but a lot of that is because we've had this tremendous backlog with COVID. If we hadn't had that, I think we would be a little bit ahead of where we are now. We'd be making more ground up because we've got more people who are focused on these cases, but we just got a backlog we're working through as opposed to just, and we're still digging out, but the answer to your question is, yeah, we're still just holding our own as opposed to making up ground, but I still think that, I mean, we're making up ground, we're picking up pace each month, I think, that we're doing this. We're getting more and more cases resolved as opposed to those that are being filed. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious about the crisis stabilization unit. Can you all give us?
They're still looking for staffing, and until they get staffing, they can't open. We have our next Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meeting is the 28th of this month, and Kristen will give us an update then. But as of this past month, which was 2 weeks ago, was our last Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meeting. She is still looking for staffing.
And it's the contractor that's doing it, not us trying to do that.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
It's UAMS.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
You know, that issue is troubling for me. I mean, we're talking about all these programs that we're gonna do to help all these people, and we've got a building 2 blocks away set up, ready to go, and if UAMS can't hire the people, I don't know who can.
That is predominantly because in the medical field, they are having more trouble finding people than in social services. Social services they have an abundance of jobs and more people looking for jobs, whereas the medical community, the traveling nurses get paid more, and so it's harder to get nurses who want to stay in one place.
Well, I get it, but our answer is to find a solution. Any other questions? Thank you all. We'll see you next month. All right, item number 6 on the agenda is an ordinance calling on a special election in Washington County on the question of issuing bonds. I'm gonna read the ordinance, I'll make a motion, and then if there's a second, I'll have some comments. An ordinance calling a special election in Washington County, Arkansas on the question of issuing bonds under Amendment number 62 to the Constitution of the State of Arkansas. for the purpose of financing all or a portion of the cost of capital improvements, levying a new 1/4% sales and use tax for the purpose of retiring such bonds and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. I move that we pass this to the Finance and Budget Committee with a due pass recommendation. We have a motion and a second, and let me make a couple comments and then I'll open it up to my colleagues here. First of all, we have a constitutional requirement to provide a detention center in Washington County. That's not debatable. The sheriff has been telling us for at least 6 years that I've been hearing it, that we need to do something and that it's very crowded. I have been there myself, I've seen it. It's not only crowded, it's a little bit scary. Almost 4 years ago, in 2018, the Quorum Court had a very similar ordinance to this one in front of them. In fact, it was almost identical. They opted to take no action at that time. The projected cost in December of 2018 was in the $40 to $45 million range. In 2019, we funded a study, and the study suggested a lot of things that might be done to solve the overcrowding. And as we've heard tonight, it's disturbing to me that we can't staff the crisis stabilization unit, and it's been sitting empty for, I don't know how long, a year? It's been sitting empty for a long time. I applaud Nick Robbins' program and the Returning Home program. The data that the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee gave us a month ago said that the program, working as well as it will, saved us 475 bed days a year. If you divide that by 365, that frees up 1.3 beds in the jail. And again, I support that program, but it would take 100 of those programs active in Washington County today to get the people off the floor that are sleeping on the floor. I think it's time that we send this to the Finance and Budget Committee and ultimately to the Quorum Court, and we let the taxpayers tell us if they want us to build a new jail, an addition on the jail in Washington County. And it's important to me that if we're gonna do it, we get it done so this special election will be held the same day as the general election in November. That's all I've got. Justice Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you going to be able to answer questions, or
Say that again?
are you going to be able to answer questions, or is there somebody here that can? I have some questions.
We have answers on the bond questions.
Okay. So I want to first ask about the addition of the juvenile court expansion in this. So thinking back, maybe 2018, 2019, the projected cost for that expansion was about $800,000. And then it came to us in early 2020 where we were going to use the fines and fees that had been going to pay off the bonds on the historic courthouse renovation to fund that expansion at a cost of around $4.5 million. So I can't imagine that we've gone from $4.5 million in 2020 to $28.5 million. That is one fancy courthouse. And so I'm curious what has changed about the juvenile court plans that it's gotten so expensive. And then in addition, I don't understand why we're not exploring using ARPA funding for that project, because I understand that to be a proper infrastructure use. And I think a lot of people that would like to see that some of those CARES and ARPA funds go to societal use, a community use, I think they would agree that juvenile court is a place where that at least is more helpful than a jail expansion. And so I don't understand why we've added in the juvenile court that's at so much cost from where it was 2 years ago, and then why we have to take it to the taxes. We can't use some of the ARPA money.
And I can't, Brian Lester had worked on this with the judge, and Brian is sick today, so I can't answer the question.
Okay, so let me move on to my questions then. I see Kevin is here, maybe he knows. I think he's the bond guy. So it's a quarter-cent sales tax for the $28.5 million juvenile expansion, and then a quarter-cent for the it's 1/4 cent?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That's, let me introduce myself.
yes, I'm sorry.
Kevin Fott with Stevens, and I was here in 2018 as we talked about this too. So I was directed just to do the analysis. I was given the amounts of $100 million for the jail, $25 million for the juvenile courts. What you see in the ordinance are maximum principal amounts, and the bond attorneys direct us to always come up with that amount, and that's based on cost of issuance and potential reserves that we have to set aside for a bond issue. So that's the maximum principal amount, even though the construction fund or the project amounts would still be 120 and then 25 for the juvenile. Does that make sense?
So, but it's just 1/4 cent sales tax.
One
for-
quarter for the whole thing.
For the whole thing. So if you add together the 113.5 and the 28.5, and we're at, almost we're over $140 million. How long will it take Washington County taxpayers at a quarter-cent sales tax to pay off $140 million?
This ordinance, and keep in mind, I'm not the attorney, but this ordinance is set up so that there's two different statutes. There's a capital penny statute of which you can issue bonds with. There's also a general penny. This ordinance is set up so that it's the capital penny, meaning all the collections for the tax would go to pay off debt. So the stated maturity from our analysis is 2040. Based on your historical growth and your historical collections, we expect the bonds would pay off in 2032, however. So again, as the tax continues to grow, and that analysis assumes a 3% growth in your tax. Currently, your tax is, and I had calculated.
We're at 9.75, I think.
Yeah, I mean, your tax is growing at like,
Oh, I see what you're saying. The
at a
increase.
rate of, an average rate of like 7% just since 2018. So we're assuming a 3% growth, which we think would be conservative. But again, all that tax goes to pay off debt early, so that therefore, again, you have a stated maturity of 2040, yet it pays off earlier.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And also, too, to clarify that, even without growth, there is what we call coverage. So there's, I don't know, almost $4 million or so. I'd have to look at my analysis. You're collecting on a quarter cent 14.14 million. Our estimated annual debt service is 10.25. So you can calculate that difference. And that difference also goes to pay off debt early. Because again, that capital penny can only be used for debt, can't be used for anything else.
Okay. So did you hire the bond counsel, or did the county hire bond counsel? Do you know?
I have not hired, I mean, I didn't do it.
Okay, I didn't know.
It's
Do you know
Shep
who-
Russell from Friday Eldridge and Clark,
Okay.
who's typically done your bond work, as we've
Okay.
typically done your underwriting work in the past too, so.
So in talking about, I think I heard you say that all of it, the quarter cent is pledged to pay off the bonds, so
Correct.
none of it is pledged for operational expenses for the
Correct.
jail expansion.
Correct. That was the way we were directed to look at the analysis. You have the option, you could do that as well, but that's not what we did here.
Okay, so timing-wise, though, if, let's say that it's on the ballot in November and it's passed, so the bonds then, I guess, can be issued immediately to begin work?
They could be. Our schedule showed that, assuming everything passes, that we would issue debt, or we'd offer the bonds, so sell the bonds in February, mid-February, and then close sometime in March, late March. Now, again, that's a fluid schedule, but that's what I looked at.
Okay,
Because it takes, quite a few months to develop the documents, plus the tax wouldn't go into effect until April anyway, even if it passed.
I see, okay.
So,
I see Judge Wood came in. Maybe he can answer my questions about the juvenile court expansion. Judge, I had asked a couple of questions about when we had initially heard that the juvenile court expansion, I think, would cost about $800,000. When you came to us in early 2020, it was going to be about 4.5 when we were looking at using the fines and fees that were on the historic courthouse, that those bonds had been paid off. So I'm curious how we got from 800 to 4.5 to 28.5 in such a short time. It seems like the Taj Mahal of courthouses.
I don't have the drawings and the engineering plans and all, but I do think that this adding additional level to the courthouse, as well as making more room for the prosecutors and the public defenders. So I think that's what has caused it to go even higher than the original plan, which was somewhat narrow in scope versus what it is now. But I don't have any of that in front of me.
I didn't think a $4.5 million plan was narrow in scope, but okay. Let me ask you then, did we explore using ARPA funds to pay for that building? Because my understanding is that's exactly what ARPA funds are intended for, as opposed to asking the court, or asking the citizens to pay for another 18 years. Okay. Well, I don't think anybody in this room is unaware of what my position on this is. I think that almost this same court 2 years ago or 3 years ago rejected this plan. We're talking about how many people are on the floor right now, and the reality is we're still going to be facing this problem for the next 2 to 3 years while this expansion is built. And so to say, oh gosh, this is an emergency, it's an emergency, but we're planning for 3 years down the road really doesn't address the emergency. I've heard over and over again is why we are not doing more with our initiatives that were recommended by the criminal justice study that we had done. We can talk about can't hire at the CSU. Well, we also didn't have to close it. We could have used CARES money to keep the CSU open. We wouldn't have lost people. We wouldn't have to hire people. It was closed and announced as a surprise to the quorum court. So if you want to talk about why we're not providing services, it's because we closed the CSU. And Returning Home is doing a great job, but April has been here from Magdalene Serenity House, I don't know how many times, talking about the work that she can do, and we won't even let her be on an agenda. So there are so many more things we could be doing to address the issues at the jail than just building a place to house people. We're not solving societal's problems, we're just making them worse. Overwhelmingly, the issues at our jail are drugs, and we're doing virtually nothing to address that in society. So we're asking the citizens of Washington County to pay, and I'm just setting aside the juvenile court facility right now, $113.5 million over 18 years. We haven't even addressed the maintenance costs. We're going to build it, and then we're going to have to ask for a sustaining sales tax to pay for it. And this is bigger than our current jail. We're talking about 1,000 beds. So we already have a sales tax dedicated to it. We're probably going to have to more than double that. So this is not just an 18-year sales tax. This is probably a forever sales tax that will put Washington County as the highest sales tax in the state. And what we're saying is to the people of Washington County, we're sorry that you are poor. We're sorry that you have societal issues. We don't care. We just want to throw you in jail. That's what we're saying to the people of Washington County. And it's very depressing that that is what this supposedly conservative court thinks to do. Tax and spend, let's build a bigger jail, fill it up, and lock away the people and just write them off. But it's amazing to me that we can just, at the drop of a hat, let's hurry, let's get it up on the ballot, let's spend $140 million. We don't know if we could use ARPA funds for the juvenile court. We don't know. We can't answer that. Let's hurry up and get it on the ballot. Hurry up, hurry up. But we haven't considered spending a dime on anything other than basically returning home. That is called giving up on humanity. That is not a Christian view. It is not my view. And it's really distressing that that's what we have to say for the people of Washington County. That we don't care about them enough to try to help them. We would just rather lock them up. And let me tell you, you build 1,000 beds, we're gonna fill them. That's what's gonna happen. You think you're gonna solve the backlog in the justice program by building more beds? No. Just gonna create more backlogs because nobody's in a hurry because there's all this space at the jail. It's really sad. And I've heard overwhelmingly from my constituents that this is not what they want, and they want much better for a community that's as caring as Washington County. Thank you.
Other comments? Justice Ushry?
Thank you very much. There are several things that we need to be aware of. Number one, it's going to take both. It's going to take expanding the jail and all these programs. Number one, in the last year and a half, once we got the study done, we've begun to do that. It takes time, and we're having trouble hiring people to do those things too. As far as the pretrial services go and the other things that we can do, all the programs that we need to be putting in place, there's no place to do them. There's no place at the jail to do any kind of drug rehabilitation. There's no place to do any kind of training. There's no room. The people are on top of each other. And we've got to expand the jail. We've got to have enough room. Northwest Arkansas has grown exponentially. And whether we like it or not, there's a lot more people here. The need is a lot greater. We need to do both. And we're going to continue our focus on doing all the things that we're doing. We're going to, but again, if we do nothing now, then in a few years, we're going to be in much worse shape than we are now. If we'd done what we did before, we might be in a position now where we could do a lot of these things that people keep talking about. This has to be done. It has to be done now. I don't think it's rush, not when we've spent 5 years on it, going back and forth on this thing. We need to not kick the can down the road. We need to address it, and we need to address it promptly. Thank you.
Other comments? Justice Rio-Stafford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my constituents, have heard overwhelmingly folks opposed to this, but also a lot of questions. I think there's a lot of confusion around this. People have a lot of questions around various aspects of it, because I think a lot of this hasn't been maybe explained very well. There's been a lot of murkiness. And I'm hoping someone maybe from the Sheriff's Department could come up and answer a few questions. I've summarized feedback from the public into a few broad questions, and I'm hoping someone, since we're having this discussion, could help shed some light on some things. If someone from the Sheriff's Department wants to come up. Anyone? Thank you, Sheriff Helder. It's good to see you.
Hey.
One of the big things that I've heard from feedback from members of the public, they're aware, a lot of folks are aware that back in 2020, at the start of the pandemic, that the jail, there was a major decrease in the jail population at that time, where we were not overcrowded at the, near the start of the pandemic. And a lot of folks have asked, why aren't we not continuing to do whatever it was that we did back then? That's a major theme that I've heard from folks. And what would you say to that?
I would say that we were facing exigent circumstances wherein we were worried about the safety of our detainees, which is one of my constitutional requirements. So what we identified were people that, in our minds and in the mind of the prosecutor and the circuit courts, to some degree would be less of a threat to public safety were they released to prevent them from contracting this virus. The reason, I suppose, that we are no longer doing that, we're not under the same guys that we were. We know more about the virus. We know more about treating it. We've had over 1,000, probably close to 1,300 cases within the jail since then without a single fatality or hospitalization. Well, I'll take that back. The only person that was hospitalized was somebody that refused treatment by our medical staff. They went to the hospital, were released that day. And then to follow up on that, another reason is, I don't know the percentage, but it's a large percentage of those that were released have been rearrested and are back in our facility.
And so just as a reminder, I remember some of that involved like ankle monitors and things like that, right? Okay. Will this proposal, it's kind of unclear from this, will this proposal for the expansion include any space for diversionary programming, like mental health treatment areas and other things like that?
That is our plan, is to provide space. I think that Mr. Usry alluded to that. We also have had preliminary conversations about visiting places like Tulsa and other places that have a robust program within their detention facility dealing with mental health. So those are things that we would like to address once we have additional space. Currently, there is no space to conduct any kind of programming. Prior to our severe overcrowding and prior to COVID, we had adult education, we had plans for people to obtain their GEDs, we had AA, we had NA, we had everybody that from the outside world that could come in, along with our ministerial programs. So we are out of room to conduct any vibrant programs, if you will. We just don't have the space internally. But our thoughts are that once we get an expansion, that we can partner with not only our mental health community, but with our reentry programs, things of that nature.
Another thing that folks have brought up is the funding for additional staff and increased operations and maintenance. Where is that money supposed to come from? Is there a possibility that this will end up being a permanent sales tax increase?
Not the way it's written. I've had discussions with the authors of this ordinance. That is a concern of mine based on prior history, but I have confidence that this legislative body, Budget Finance, I don't think this would be proposed in the manner it is if they didn't have plans to collect money or projections of increased sales tax collections. So I'm not in the legislative body. That's not really in my bailiwick, but I'd be less than truthful if I didn't tell you it was a concern.
But it is gonna incur, additional staff and additional, operational spending.
Of course.
So far, to my knowledge, we as the Quorum Court have had zero discussions about where that money's gonna come from. So, that is definitely a concern. Some other folks have raised concerns that we're using out-of-state contractors. What do you say to folks who are concerned about making sure that our tax dollars stay here in Arkansas?
We're not under contract at this point on this until it's let. On the, what I want to call it, the phase 1 project or the COVID mitigation, if that's able to move forward, which I believe it should and will, we did what we did. We put it out for the experts in the field and people that we had a comfort level with that had intimate knowledge with our facility. So the contractors are from out of state, but that's what they do for a living, and we had very, very great success and continued success with that relationship. So who they hire to do the work locally, the bricklayers, the whoever, I mean, I would assume they'll hire those folks locally. I mean, I don't know.
So
I'm probably not totally following the conversation in that, but.
So the engineering firm that we're using right now and all that kind of stuff, they're, I think, in Tennessee, right?
Correct.
Yeah. If this comes to pass, will that part of it be done by then? Will they continue on as a vendor? Will that go into open bidding? Is there a possibility of having an in-state company do that part?
I don't fully know the answer to that. As I stated earlier, it is my hope and desire that we move forward with the initial project so that we can get these people off the floor in a more expedient manner. But that will require the use of the COVID funds, and I don't know, here again, I'm on the other side of the bench from the legislative group, which is you all, to try and figure out what funds are going to be used for what. But it is my desire that that project moves forward. It wouldn't hurt my feelings a bit if Spirit Architecture in Southfield got the bid, because I'm totally confident they know what they're doing. That's their entire repertoire, if you will, is institutional buildings, specifically county jails. So.
And there's really no one you feel like is like that here inside our state?
Do you know anybody?
I'm not super familiar with
I'm unfamiliar with
these kind of
anybody,
contractors. I'm
within-
just asking the,
Sure.
And these are questions, again, that my constituents have brought forward, they're
Sure.
curious about. Another thing that I've heard from people, Benton County is also looking at a multi-million-dollar jail expansion up there. And one of the recommendations from the 2020 Criminal Justice Assessment was the idea of a regional jail. The thinking behind that was that it might help consolidate staff and operations and could potentially bring down the costs instead of each county building their own expensive jail expansion. Have there been any serious discussions about this with our partners in Benton County? And if not, why?
We've had discussions dating to pre-COVID, in fact, at the urging of our court, and with Madison County's situation, having to close their jail, and we were basically ultimately forced into disengaging from that contract. We have had those conversations, but it is much more complicated than to just throw out the politically popular term regional jail, regional this and that, when you have every 4 years a new judge potentially, a new sheriff potentially, every 2 years new courts. It's very complicated. I think the one that probably gained more traction than any was to partner with the state, and then however you identified it and wherever you placed it, then everybody could take part in a regional prison, if you will. They've been working on this philosophy for about 6 years in Drew County and another county or two in that area. They still have yet to break ground because it is so complicated dealing with state and county governments. So yes, we have had very robust conversations and lengthy conversations, but it's just no traction, and not sure that I would be in favor of it for a number of reasons.
Okay. I just want to tell you, like I said, the feedback that I've gotten overwhelmingly from folks within my district and just stuff that we've all gotten overall has been pretty, I'll say it's a tough sell, pretty skeptical about this. But I want to thank you for answering these questions in such detail, because I know that there's a lot of questions out there.
Of course.
A lot of unanswered questions, so thank you.
You're welcome. And it's my hope that all of these questions can be answered and that we get a true feel of what the overall citizenry of Washington County feels about this issue. And I think that's why I've requested that we move forward with a ballot issue. And then we'll really know what the public wants. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Don't leave.
Okay.
Justice Ecke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Helder, what is your primary constitutional duty?
Well, I have three. It's for the enforcement of Washington County, the law enforcement end. It's the service of the courts, and then running a detention center.
Anywhere in there, does it say anything about citizen safety?
Well, that deals with the overall idea and umbrella of the constitutional requirements of sheriff. It's public safety through all three of my mandates.
So public safety is top on the list?
It's the top priority,
It's the priority.
of course.
And I know that it's our job, our constitutional duty, not citizen safety. That's your job. Our job is to fund the needs of the county, and this is a need. Secondly, is it your attitude or policy or procedure to just lock them up and throw away the key?
No, I mean, certainly not. However, my job is the three things that I just told you. It's the enforcement end, it's court services, and then it's running a detention center. It is not a constitutional requirement of the sheriff, nor should it be, to do all the things that we've talked about tonight. But I think that we should, in a responsible manner, partner with our community services if we can get the space to try and achieve some of these outcomes, whether it's addiction or mental health issues. But it is not the responsibility of the sheriff or the sheriff's office or government, for that matter, to do a lot of these things, in my opinion. And it's certainly not constitutionally spelled out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Justice Lemming?
Thank you, Tim. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
She mentioned the fact of the COVID. I believe what the COVID has caused is what's happened in the rural area that we're seeing right now is the fact is every night my neighbors is losing a tractor, they're losing pickups. I lost a Corvette Friday night, Saturday night. It don't matter if kid, they shouldn't be driving my car, it ain't theirs. But that's the kind of crud that's happening because of Mr. Sheriff being a nice guy, ticketing them, sending them home. We've had people shot at, we've had people, Morrow had a big deal down there just the other day, just because we let somebody out, released them. That's the problem. We can't let these people continue on. It's gonna be a lot more going to, people's gonna start getting shot out in the rural areas because farmers are tired of getting their tractors stole, pickups stole, tools stole. It's happening every freaking night, and it's gotta stop. And the jail overcrowding we gotta build a jail, we gotta move on. Like Mr. Esri said, we got other programs we can do with building a jail. You gotta have more space. The mental health part in that would be good. So Washington County's big and growing leaps and bounds. The jail's gotta grow too. Just facts of life, just the way it is. And I believe we're gonna see a lot more crime if we don't build a jail and we just keep slapping them on the hand and sending them down the road. It's gonna get worse. Killings is gonna start a lot worse. A lot more thieving's gonna happen. We ain't got no choice. I'm here to back you, and I support you, 100%.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, may I respond even though there wasn't a question along those lines? Okay. I was just saying, may I respond to Mr. Lemming's statement? Well, here's all I was going to say is that to go back to your comments about the release during COVID, obviously we were doing that in the great unknown, something that was new to us, and we were really concerned, going back to my constitutional mandate, which is the safety and welfare of our detainees as we run a detention center responsibly. But when we did mass releases, we were very careful, of course, not to release murderers, rapists, violent offenders. But what we were forced to do was release poor decision makers and knuckleheads. And I think what we saw, one of those cases that comes to mind, and the reason I'm bringing this up is what you said. Officer Apple in Pea Ridge would be alive today had we not released a person that would have otherwise been required to be in jail. And that's the irresponsible part of mass releases, kind of going from what he said to what you were talking about. I just think that we have to be very careful and to always remember that this is about public safety, and this is about quality of life in Washington County. And if you have, and I'm sorry, this is regurgitation of some things, but when you have quality law enforcement, you know what? They're going to do their job, and they're going to arrest people. But without the ability to keep people in the detention center is counterproductive. You no longer have public safety as a paramount feature of your county because there's no room. And then we have to start deciding who gets released and who doesn't. And I know that there are different thoughts on this, but please remember my constitutional mandate. It's law enforcement, and it's running a detention center. So I'm going to be very focused, laser focused on what my goals are in the community that I will no longer be sheriff in, but that I'm going to live in and watch my grandkids grow up in. So it's paramount, in my view, that we expand the detention centers so law enforcement can do their job, the criminal justice system can do their job, and if we have the space, by all means, let's get involved with our community partners and provide some of these services. But we absolutely cannot do that in the position we're in right now. Thank you. Sorry, I rambled.
Thank you, Sheriff.
You're welcome.
Other questions? We'll go to public comment before we vote. We will have a 12-minute public comment period. Each speaker will get 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and where you live.
My name is Beth Coker. I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. First of all, I want to just talk about why our jail is so full today. I checked this morning we had 741 people that were listed. There was maybe more than that because we have restrictive bookings and not everyone is listed on the roster. There were 298 FTAs. There were 39 309s. 309s are people that we bring in to do the work at the jail, like cooking and cleaning. Benton County does not do 309s because they don't have room for them. We had 5 people from Madison County. We had 79 U.S. Marshal holds, 79. Another reason that we're so overcrowded is that we have people sitting in the jail because they're too poor to buy their freedom. They're there pre-trial, which means they haven't been found guilty. They're there because they don't have the money. Am I not speaking clearly? Are you all hearing me? Okay, I'm sorry. So when I came in, there was, I'm sorry I was a little late coming in, but I heard something about that might be done. But no, the study was not about what might be done. The study was about what should be done. And we talk about the program with returning home, and that's good. I'm glad we have that program. That's one program for a very limited number of men. The study also said we need a robust pretrial services system program. That is something that we could implement quickly and efficiently, and what it would do, it would assess people when they're in the jail, whether or not they could be released. They'd make recommendations to the judges and the prosecutor on that, and they would be released, but they wouldn't just be turned loose. They would be connected to services like court reminders, transportation, help with getting food and housing. Another reason that we have so many people recycling through our jail is because of housing. Today, we have 100 people in our jail who are there listed as homeless, or else they're listed as restrictive. As 1832 South School Street, which is the address for the Seven Hills Homeless Shelter. So what the study said was that we would need to build a larger jail only if we do nothing, and that's pretty much what we're doing right now. And I've heard it said that that it's a democratic thing to do is to send this to the voters and let them decide. Well, to that I would say, if you really want to be democratic, then we would have options on there other than just building a jail. We could have option to finance all the pretrial and the mental health court, expand drug court, do all the things that the study suggested and recommended that we do, but we're not doing that. And as to the comments about it's your constitutional duty to fund the jail, I want to say you are funding the jail. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. I don't know why I've had so much trouble finding out who the bond counsel is, but I'm glad to find out tonight who it is. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Adeline Tyler Williams, Episcopal priest at St. Paul's just across the street, and live here in Fayetteville. I want to speak to you from a Christian perspective. I'm a Christian minister, and I know many of you share the Christian faith, but these things speak to people beyond Christians as well. The origins of our Christian faith involve many imprisonments. St. Paul, the patron saint for my church, wrote many of his letters from prison. Many early Christians were arrested and imprisoned for their faith, and our own Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was arrested and killed by the state. We can look back at these events and these people and see the injustice and terror that was attached to their imprisonments. And I'm saddened to say that I imagine generations from now, people may say the very same things about our county. The truth of the matter is that prisons don't necessarily create safer communities. They create the illusion of safety for people who are white and middle and upper class, people much like myself, I'll admit that. But it ends up criminalizing people of color, people experiencing mental illness, and people living in poverty. So we must ask ourselves that simple question that many of us learned at church camps and in Sunday school. What would Jesus do? Jesus would care for people with mental illness and would seek their healing. He would create communities where they could thrive and be affirmed. Jesus would look to address issues of systemic poverty and to facilitate processes towards sustainable lifestyles. Jesus would provide resources for healing, well-being, and flourishing in community. Washington County has invested in learning about these alternatives to over-policing and imprisonment. We can use this money towards those kind of community resources. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it requires hiring more people, but we can divert these funds to prevent people from being in prison. They can be at home with their families. They can be at work. They can be contributing to life here in our Northwest Arkansas community. We have a choice to make here tonight, and we have a choice that we may have to make again on the ballot in November. I want to make it very plain that my understanding is that if we choose jail expansion, we choose the side of the oppressor. We choose to be contrary to Jesus.
Good evening. My name is Ann Britton. I live in Prairie Grove, Arkansas. Jesus also said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's." You all are sworn to uphold the Constitution of both the United States and the state of Arkansas. The safety of the citizen takes priority over everyone. The safety of our law enforcement should as well, because they're out there every day risking their life. They don't know when they do a traffic stop what's going to happen. And if we look at our inner cities that have gone soft on crime and release people who are animals to go and do it again? We don't want to be that. We need to have sufficient law enforcement access to those who break the law to make sure that people like me who are out here functioning in society within the law are safe. And also those people who are mentally ill are safe. They're going to be safer in a jail than a lot of times out in the community, trust me. The problem is this state needs a greater, larger state hospital. That's not your problem here. Your problem is giving the law enforcement community all the tools and support they need, along with the safety of the citizens of Washington County and Northwest Arkansas. We have a big crime wave coming from the southern border. 140 countries have illegal immigrants who are criminals just crossing the border. We're going to have more crime. It's going to come here. We should have had this new jail years ago. And I thank you for your time. I support giving the people of this county the opportunity to decide this issue. We are an elected representative republic, not a democracy. Thank you very much.
We have 2 more minutes. Is there another speaker?
Good evening, Josh Moody, Fayetteville. I came in tonight with a whole list of things I was going to talk about, but as per usual, there's been things said tonight that I want to address directly. I'm reminded, I guess I feel the need to remind all of us what bail is meant for. Bail is not a way to keep, it's not a public safety issue. No judge is going to grant bail to anybody that they deem a threat to public safety, whether it's $1 or $1 million or somewhere in between. That is supposed to grant assurance that somebody will show back up for court. That's it. It's not a public safety issue. Those people that are given a bail, the judge is saying, I trust that you won't cause harm to the people in your community. Now give me some money if you want to buy your freedom. Has anybody in this body spoken with judges about possibly adjusting their bail policies? Because they do have discretion. Has anybody... I know that's not on you directly. What is on you directly is for 2 years you've been sitting on multiple solutions that could have alleviated some of the issues, because that study was published 2 years ago. And you have done nothing, despite what the vice chair said. You've exhausted all alternatives. That is not true. Now, we're talking about theft throughout the county. I was actually in your district on Thursday, and I had a lot of good conversations with people out there. Yes, people are concerned with addicts stealing things, and it is happening all over the county. As we all know, addiction does not just cause the addict to suffer. It causes the family to suffer. It causes the neighbors to suffer. It causes the community to suffer, including through theft. Now, locking them up and then eventually letting them back out, that's not changing anything. It's not making the community safer. What could potentially make the community safer, what would and will and does in other places make the community safer, is helping the people who suffer from addiction to begin with. We know this. We've been shown this. We, the taxpayers, paid for a study that you guys asked for to show us this, and yet we're not doing anything with that. I don't understand. And so here we are. Let's put a gazillion-dollar Band-Aid on it. I don't think that's the best solution. Thank you.
You ready for the question? The question is on an ordinance calling for a special election in Washington County on the question of issuing bonds. The motion was to move this in the Finance and Budget Committee with a due pass recommendation. All in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? No. The motion carries. It'll go to the Finance and Budget Committee with a due pass recommendation. Item 7 on the agenda is a public comment period. We'll have a 12-minute public comment period. Each speaker gets 3 minutes. And if you want to speak, please get ready and get up here.
Good evening. Aaron Howerton, District 4, candidate for JP. I want to start by saying thank you to a few people tonight. Thank you, JP Rio Stafford, for bringing up the 2020 mitigation efforts. I noticed that that wasn't mentioned, Chairman, in your comments. We talked about 2018 denial of passage. We talked about the 2019 study, and we skipped over the significant mitigation that dropped the population by more than 50%. So I appreciate that that was brought up tonight and discussed, because that's the first time I've heard anybody discuss that in my year of activity following and getting to know the quorum court process. And also thank you, Sheriff, for being willing to hop up and answer questions in front of this body and answer publicly for that, and offering some insight. What I'm watching happen with this issue, and some background too, I've spent 15 years working in operations. That's what I do. My whole job, day in and day out, is helping make companies run more efficiently, more smoothly, and using data and metrics to make decisions that impact cost, success, sales, growth, the whole 9 yards. It's what I do. And specifically, my profession is partner operations. Now, that may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but what that means to me is collaboration. Day in and day out, I'm working with people across my company and across this country and globe, finding ways to collaboratively solve problems for customers and for my team internally. And what I feel like I don't see happening on this court is collaboration. What I see is a bunch of grandstanding. I hear fear-mongering. I hear people drawing lines down the middle, and it's very clear from the very beginning of this conversation that there will be no other vote but a pass. Okay, we get that. It's party line. That's how it's been for the past year. So I'm up here making commentary because I just want to register that there are people that disagree with how this court is being managed. It is frustrating, especially from an operational standpoint, to hear all the questions that haven't been answered about this, that we don't know how we're going to fund it into the future. We don't actually know why the mitigation strategies were not made permanent policy. Yes, those things may open the door for mistakes, but surely there are some ways to do things like adjust the bail process so that we can actually have nonviolent offenders not spending time in a jail cell, which you could even then give to the state so you guys can make some money on it, because we know that's a part of this too. This is a huge issue. And what I don't ever hear is any meaningful discussion from this quorum court about anything that comes before it. So my hope is that my campaign this year is successful and that a lot of other campaigns are successful, because what I know also to be true is that there are several members of this court that will not be seated next year. So you're also happy to pass something that will not be your problem. You're going to pass it on to the next court, and then they're going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to clean it up, and they're going to have to answer for the problems you've created. So thank you to those who are trying to find compromise, recognizing it's a two-sided issue. Thank you.
Beth Coger, I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. With reference to something that was brought up about the thefts in the county, I want to say that 95% of the crimes against society in Washington County last year, and no, not last year, 2020, were drug and drug-related. So if we were addressing the root causes of why we have so many people in our jail, if we had drug addiction treatment, that would be a major thing that we could do. The other thing was about the cost of maintenance and operation after the new jail is built. Right now we have 710 beds jail, and it costs $17.2 million for maintenance and operation. So I think it's fair to say that might double if we increased it by 1,000 beds, and so I think that should give us a pause about how we're going to pay for that. When I first started attending these meetings in 2018 and 2019, one of the things that you were wrestling with then was how are you going to fund the maintenance and operation of the jail? And so I see that as something that should give us all pause.
Next speaker.